Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the second virtual Ocean Decade seminar. And today's seminar is on the oceans and human health. So this is obviously the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development seminar series. And if we can have the next slide, please. You might wonder who I am. I'm Sheila Heymans. I'm the Executive Director of the European Marine Board, and I will be your moderator today. And I will be taking you through the program for the next hour and a bit. So just, I think some of you will be on YouTube and some of you will be on Zoom. I'm aware that actually Zoom has got a bit of a delay. YouTube has got a bit of a delay. So I hope that this is going to work well. Next slide, please. Okay, so some housekeeping rules. Please, for the panelists, we've had this discussion. It'd be great if you can mute yourself and keep your video off. For the rest of you, you will be able to give us questions and answers if you're on Zoom through the chat, but it'll really only be about technical issues. We are recording this webinar and it will be live streamed, as I said, on YouTube. So be aware that you will be recorded in whichever way you participate here. And the recordings and the slides will be made available online after the webinar. So for any technical support, if you are on Zoom, please give a question. You can ask questions to the technical support in the chat function. We will be using Slido for any questions and answers that you might have for the speakers. And we'll also be using Slido for polls. So if you want to go into Slido, it's on your web browser, slido.com, and the code is OHH, or you can use the QR code that's on the screen right now. And if you are going to ask a question, please include your name and say who the question is for. So we will be having a panel discussion, so please make sure that you can say, who the question is for. It's not always so evident from the question. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's try that. If you can go to Slido for us. So as I said, go to slido.com and use the code OHH. And we're going to ask you two questions. The first one is, which country are you from? So if you go in there and just type in the name of the country. And then the second question, second slide, Britt, please, is which sector do you represent? So it'll be a multiple choice question. So if you can go into Slido and just answer those two questions, then we can make sure everybody knows how it works. So slido.com, the code is OHH, and if you can answer those two questions, that'd be great. And I will go into Slido and see what we have so far. So I think you can keep on doing that. So for those of you on YouTube or the others, please go to slido.com, ask us the two questions. Basically, where are you from and which sector do you represent? So the Slido poll will be open for a little while, so you can keep on doing that. If you can go to the next slide, please, Britt. Okay, so while you're doing that, just a quick rundown of what we'll be doing this afternoon. There's going to be obviously some introductory words and opening statements. Then we're going to have a quick a short film on on introducing oceans and human health for those of you that haven't really been part of the journey we've had. We are going to have 5 global voices of 5 people across the world telling us what oceans and human health mean to them. Then we're going to have a presentation on the oceans and human health and what it means for the ocean decade. Then we are going to have an interactive panel discussion, and that's definitely where you will be asking your questions in Slido. There'll be an announcement of a conference that's happening in Monaco on oceans and human health, and then we'll have a final closing with next steps. So can we go to the next slide, please? So if any of you are on social media, if you can sort of include us, put the Twitter handles for the IOC, UNESCO, for the European Marine Board, for the SOPHIE project called Oceans and Human Health EU, and for BlueHealth, which is BlueHealth EU. These last two are Horizon 2020 projects, so it'd be great if you can tag us on that. And you'll see the hashtags in the bottom, Ocean Decade and Oceans and Human Health, Ocean and Human Health. Please put those in any social media that you might be using. Next slide, please. Okay, so enough about me. We are going to have the introduction from Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin. He is the Secretary General, Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. So if you can play the video, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, or simply IOC, which is the home of ocean science in the United Nations system, I would like to thank you for joining us in this second session of the Ocean Decade virtual series. I know that there is significant enthusiasm about the topic of this event, and I hope to see many participants. Also, our thanks go to the European Marine Board, our good partners, and two projects of the Horizon 2020 European program, the project on seas, ocean and public health in Europe, and BlueHealth Project. You joined forces with IOC in organizing of this event. So definitely the issue of human health is the highest concern of our dramatic time. But the human health and the ocean health nexus is still very important and has several sides. And of course, there are now multiple solutions that we foresee from the ocean science, from the studies of marine genetics, and this call for medicines and support ocean health coming from the ocean is simply overwhelming. But still, there is an issue that human health is affected by the degrading marine ecosystems. So, in terms of the decade societal outcomes and challenges, indeed, the human health and ocean health nexus touches on at the core of the decade design. But the human health side is a relatively new topic. So I believe that it requires further design, and it has the potential to significantly affect our planning of the decade and also the actions that we're going to undertake. So this is an area of research which, in my view, requires both fast development, but also good strategic thinking and positioning, considering the new emphasis of the world on issues related to human health and still ecosystem health, ecosystems of the ocean. So I would like in this connection to applaud our good friends from Monaco for their vision, which manifested in calling a conference which is called Human Health in the Ocean in the Changing World. Very important topic, very actual for the world, and I hope that our e-session will contribute not only to the decade but also to discussions, to shaping the discussions to be held in Monaco at the early December this year. So on the 15th of October, IOC is going to announce a call for actions under the Decade of Ocean Science. So today you have a good opportunity to start thinking about collecting ideas, also forming partnerships to shape your potential proposals for the decade in the response to this call. So I think the timing for this event cannot be better, and this is an opportunity for you to also continue your discussions during the Monaco conference, because the call for action is going to be completed on the 15th of January next year, and then we will consider your ideas. So with that, let me wish you a very good session, and thank you for your attention. Also for the deliberations that you're going to have. Particularly thanks go to speakers. Thank you again. All the best.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. And I think it's a really important part of the Ocean Decade that Oceans and Human Health is involved in that. Okay, next slide, please. So now I think we are going to go back to Slido. So Britt, if you can put the Slido answers up, then we can actually look at the slide of the answers that we got from the first polls. So here you can see that we have quite a lot of participants from the Philippines, and I suspect it's the middle of the night for you guys, so or at least late in the evening. So welcome to all of you. There's quite a lot of people from France and the UK and Italy and the United Kingdom. So yes, it's great to see everybody there. Very happy to see people from South Africa as well. And okay, if we can go to the next poll. So we asked which sector do you represent, and I see that we have quite a lot of scientists and academics. That's always good to know. It's really important for the scientists to get involved with the Ocean Decade. So for me, this is wonderful news. But we also have people from the public, which is also wonderful news, and then from the UN and intergovernmental organizations, some NGOs, government, other international organizations, and business. I'm really happy to see that we have people from business as well. So that's wonderful. Okay, Britt, if we can go back to the next poll then. So now we're going to ask you, while we carry on, to describe what you think oceans and human health means to you. So if you can, again, in the word cloud in the poll, give us a description of what you think oceans and human health means, that would be great. So again, in Slido, if you can just, yeah, I think it's a very helpful way for us to visualize what people think of oceans and human health. And I hope at the end of this session, we might have different experiences. So while you're doing that, I think if we can have the next slide, please. So now we're going to show you a short film from the SOPHIE project, the Horizon 2020 project on oceans and human health. And if you can show the video, please, Britt, that'd be wonderful.
Stop. Take a moment to listen. Our health and well-being is deeply connected to our ocean, but we don't fully understand how.
People really need to become aware of the intimate relationship there is between our health and the ocean's health. And that's independent of where we live, if it's in the coast or if it's far inland.
It's really exciting that we're opening up a conversation about the health impacts or how the ocean impacts our health and well-being, as well as how we impact the ocean, and just how much we have to benefit from being able to access positive experiences in the sea and by the coast, and how damaging the consequences are when those environments are degraded.
We rely on the ocean to survive. It is a place of both discovery and recovery. Studying our interactions with coastal and ocean environments is at the heart of the emerging field of oceans and human health.
We need to work together. We need some transdisciplinary science where we all influence each other to make people aware of the interactions between ocean health and human health. That obviously is much harder than working just in your own field, and that obviously needs directed funding.
As we enter the UN Decade of Ocean Science and move towards a climate-neutral Europe, we will depend more on ocean resources.
Europe's Green Deal to be climate neutral by 2050 recognizes that there will be an increasing demand on the oceans to provide resources such as food and energy for our future generations.
Research on ocean and human health is very important for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. Because if you understand better the interactions between ocean health and human health, you can make better use of these interactions in achieving sustainable development goals.
We need to find a balance to benefit our health now and in the future, while also protecting our ocean. To find this balance, the SOPHIE project has provided a research roadmap.
The SOPHIE Strategic Research Agenda is important because it outlines the required research in 3 key areas of oceans and human health for the next 10 years. These topics definitely do not define oceans and human health, it's a very broad topic, but they certainly point into the direction of where we need to be going, how we need to be working together, and what kind of benefits both the ocean and humans could gain.
To achieve our ocean and human health goals, we need a growing global community to work together.
Awareness many times is a first step towards action, and right now we need action at all levels to improve the relationship that we have with the marine environment. And that is one of the reasons why engaging citizens is so important to advance oceans and human health.
I think that we could benefit more from the ocean if we engage the public health community more. And that could be done by engaging them more in local processes for public planning, but also for health plans that can be made on a local scale.
To me, the big challenge is bringing the area of public health and medical health and prevention together with environmental science, marine science, and also bringing with it stakeholders like policymakers, small and large businesses, NGOs, government. And if we can translate this into a better interaction with natural environments so that we don't destroy those natural environments and we realize that our health depends on the health of those natural environments, then it's a better future for our children and generations to come.
Join this growing community and help us take oceans and human health forward.
Thank you very much, Britt. So that was a quick film, movie about what oceans and human health mean and about the work that we did in the SOPHIE project. So if we can get the next slide, please. So before we go to the global voices, actually, sorry, I'm just changing the agenda here. I think it'd be quite nice to show people what the answers were of the word cloud about what oceans and human health means. So can we see that? Wonderful. So, I mean, I think this is really great. It shows us that people think that oceans and human health is life, sustainability, survival, future, balance, well-being, connection, interdependence, which is a really good one for me. And we have highly interconnected, lots of words there that describe the same thing, intertwined, for instance. So it's really great to see that people have a very similar idea about it, even if you don't use necessarily the same words. So we're going to do a similar poll again later, so you can see if your mind changes over time. So if we can go to the global voices, maybe go back to the PowerPoint, and then we're going to have, as I said, 5 global voices. So we have asked 5 people from across the world to give us their impressions of what oceans and human health means. And we've asked them to send us little videos and put them all together. So if you can play that video now, please, Britt, that'd be great.
Hello, my name is Sandra Howard. I am from Providencia, a Colombian island in the Southwest Caribbean part of the Seaflower Biosphere Reserve. I'm a journalist and a tourism administrator. And for 5 years, I was also Vice Minister of Tourism of Colombia and a promoter of sustainable tourism as a tool for conservation and community development. Coming from a small oceanic island surrounded by one of the largest coral reef barriers in the world, it is absolutely clear to me the deep bonds we share with the oceans and the delicate balance we are interfering with due to lack of education, poor management, and not enforcing the regulations in place. The experience of following closely the declaration of the Biosphere Reserve and Marine Protected Area since year 2000 emphasize the need to promote research and create local communities' capacity to develop a healthier relationship with the sea we rely upon, especially in the regions of island states like the Caribbean and least developed countries around the world. For decades, our nations have been taking for granted the abundant resources produced underwater, and even those that come just from being next to it, the enormous benefits to mental and physical health, and the prime role it plays in the planet's survival. But it seems that we have forgotten that if our oceans are not healthy, we will soon be sick as well. I strongly believe that the same way that we are becoming slowly but steadily more aware of the need for sustainable practices in tourism fields, this must also apply for all community, artisanal, and industrial activities in our waters. The Ocean Decade is a practical way to raise awareness, focus on the need for global actions, and allocate the resources needed to conduct the investigations and strategies that can help us attain the sustainable development goals by aligning worldwide efforts at different scales involving communities, private and public sector.
I am Josep Lloret, marine biologist at the University of Girona and director of the Oceans and Human Health Chair in Roses.
I study and disseminate the importance of marine ecosystems on human health and well-being, considering three topics: healthy and sustainable marine food and fisheries, healthy and sustainable maritime recreational activities such as scuba diving, sailing, swimming, etc., and the conservation of marine species with bioactive potential, leading to the discovery of new drugs from marine origin. The Oceans and Human Health Chair in Roses is a new tool in oceans and human health science that enjoys the collaboration of more than 50 experts, including marine biologists, physicians, social science, veterinarians, environmental and health managers, and environmental and patent organizations. The chair carries out research and transfer of knowledge to better understand the links between the oceans and human health and to ensure a sustainable and healthy use of our seas and oceans.
For me, the Oceans and Human Health discipline means a new frontier of research and dissemination that has to explore the benefits and the risks coming from the seas.
Oceans and Human Health Chair was established from the bottom, not from upstairs. So everything started with engagement of coastal communities, scuba divers, local fishermen, also the city council, the local city council, local stakeholders, other local stakeholders like patent organizations, like for example cancer organizations, and so everybody put together their knowledge and their ideas to contribute to the idea of the oceans and human health discipline.
Hello everyone, I'm very happy to be here. My name is Dr. Jacqueline Uku. I'm a senior research officer at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, and I also serve as the president of the Western Indian Ocean Marine Science Association. My passion has been the development of a blue economy, and this is a dialogue that our nations are taking up with an eye for developing coastal economies. But I recognize that we can only do so if our coastlines remain healthy and our populations remain healthy. One thing we use as women of the coast in different African nations is to communicate through the fabric we wear. So a lot of our fabric will have messages, key messages about our environment, about our well-being, and about our emotions. And this particular one has a billfish and jumping out of the sea, and it has seafarers. And it says that our livelihoods are a gift from God. And for me, it's an embodiment of a healthy ocean that provides for food, that provides for all that we need to sustain our life and to sustain our health. And this is what our communities desire, and this is what they're communicating. However, recent events help us reflect a bit more about how much we need to do to maintain a healthy coastline. We recently had an oil spill on the shoreline of Mauritius, and the consequences are immeasurable. These consequences will pass on to the population and will impact on human health. As we reflect, I recognize that 60% of the African population is youthful, and 40% is adults like me who have the responsibility to make an impact and to pass on a healthy ocean to the next generation. So I remain hopeful that the decade for ocean science will empower us as an adult population to hand over a new, renewed ocean to the next generation, and an ocean that is healthy, an ocean that provides all the benefits that we have enjoyed, and an ocean that is clean for the next generation. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Timothy Bouley, and I am an ocean biotechnology entrepreneur. To me, the connection between the ocean and human health is fundamental. 2/3 of the human body is salt water. This is not a coincidence. We, like all other life on land, evolved from life in the ocean. But because we did not stay in the ocean, took the ocean with us. All of our cellular biochemistry, and as a result, our protein, enzymes, and even DNA are dependent on maintaining this right balance of salt ions and water. Appreciation of this concept changed my life. 5 years ago, I was working here. The World Bank. We had a new flagship investment program called the Global Partnership for Oceans. And hundreds of meetings and millions of dollars spent, this deep biological connection never once came up. So one day, during a meeting in the executive boardroom on the 13th floor of World Bank headquarters, decided I was going to leave my job and restructure my life to explore and drive ocean-related biotech innovation. To me, this has two sides. The first is about solving health and medical problems. The constant motion and competitive marine environment has led to complex molecules and powerful enzymes which have real effect in humans. By studying sea creatures, 13 Nobel Prizes have been awarded, some of which have led to any of the dozens of marine-derived drugs, laboratory procedures, surgical products, and cosmetics currently in use. On the flip side, we've become very savvy in our own ability to use biotech to enhance our lives. Technologies originally developed to improve human health, like CRISPR, DNA sequencing, and nanoscience, can also now be applied to improve conservation efforts and enhance the sustainability of ocean industries like fishing, aquaculture, and tourism. The ocean decade, unfortunately, has also started as the COVID decade, but there's opportunity in that. As the world focuses on public health and biotech innovation to get us out of this mess, we can both highlight the solutions that have marine origins and refocus on building a sustainable economy that nourishes and is nourished by a healthy living ocean. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Lota. I was raised in a small island in Palawan, Philippines. My grandparents and their families were subsistence fishers. They would forage the sea every day of their lives. I have devoted most of my professional life in teaching and doing research and extension activities to contribute towards sustainable management of our marine ecosystems. To me, ocean and human health means happy and healthy people, getting their food, livelihood, and other benefits from well-managed and productive marine ecosystems. That fishers are able to sustain the needs of their families from their catch and harvest. They are safe from sickness and hazards while meeting their needs. and they are responsible stewards of the resources in the sea by doing sustainable practices and taking care of the marine habitats. Ocean and human health can enable the ocean decade by highlighting that many people depend on resources from the sea, that they need the various ecosystem services provided by the marine environment, such as food and livelihood, that potential disasters that may affect their communities during typhoons can be minimized if we manage our marine environments, like the mangroves and coastal forests, sustainably, and that overall, healthy ocean means healthy people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Britt. So those were 5 global voices, which I think really spans a good, well, geographic sort of span, but also gives you a good overview of what oceans and human health means to people across the world. So if we can have the next slide, I think if you have any questions for the panelists, you can actually use Slido to pose your questions. Remember slido.com and use OHH as the code to get in, or you can use the QR code there. And then if you have any questions, please remember to put who the question is for in Slido so that I would know afterwards to answer these, to ask these questions. We will have some of these global voices on our panel, so you'll be able to ask they'll be able to answer your questions. But also, if we can't answer them, then we will send it to them and we can give you the answers later. So make sure you've put your name in there as well. Okay, can we get the next slide, please? So this also counts for Professor Lora Fleming. She will also be on the panel. So if you have any questions on her presentation, which she's about to give you, you can also use Slido for that. So Lora is the Center Director for the World Health Organization Collaborating Center and the European Center for Environmental and Human Health at the University of Exeter. And Lora is going to give us an overview of oceans and human health and how it links with the Ocean Decade. Lora, if you want to switch on your video and audio, I will switch myself off and I will leave you to do your presentation.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you to my colleagues at the IOC and the European Marine Board and the SOPHIE and BlueHealth projects. So what I want to briefly say, and I must say the global voices are a hard act to follow, is to talk a little bit about some of the research we've been doing around the evidence base for oceans and human health and what we think are some next steps that could go forward within the context of the Ocean Decade. Next slide. Next slide. So briefly, you've heard, and many people on this call, on this webinar, understand that the ocean could present risks to health and well-being. So clearly, issues such as extreme weather events, which is made worse by our climate change ongoing, harmful algal blooms and toxins, microbial pollution, particularly in coastal areas where there's also nutrient influx, and chemicals and plastics, which now seem to have intercalated themselves into many of the marine and other food chains. Next slide. However, we also have new evidence that shows that interacting with blue environments, particularly ocean, can be good for our physical health and our mental well-being. We know that protein from seafood, as well as important nutrients, can be protective of chronic diseases. We know that the ocean is a source increasingly of renewable energy and for thousands of years has helped us in terms of transport. And you've just heard from Dr. Timmy Bouley that marine biotechnology is growing and will produce, hopefully sustainably, resources such as medicines and food and different foods in the future. Next slide. So the Seas, Oceans and Public Health in Europe, or SOPHIE project, was funded by Horizon 2020 Europe. And we were tasked with looking at ocean and human health, interacting with as many diverse stakeholders across Europe and beyond, to be able to develop a strategic research agenda in ocean and human health for Europe and beyond. Next slide. We tried to listen to as many voices as possible. So we interacted with the general public, the medical and public health communities, the marine community, blue tourism, and policymakers. And all of their input went into our strategic research agenda. Next slide. We also made a major effort towards gathering evidence from across the marine and health communities, a transdisciplinary collaboration using many different ways of gathering evidence. And this also informed the strategic research agenda. Next slide. As you've heard from my colleague earlier, Dr. Paula Kellett, the strategic research agenda identified 3 areas of action. And there are 3 areas where public health, medical, and marine scientists and others can collaborate, and where there are research gaps. So marine biodiversity, biotechnology and medicine, sustainable seafood and healthy people, blue spaces, tourism and well-being. The actual document was created and led by the European Marine Board with 20 interdisciplinary experts, and we asked them to address the short term, which is actually the same as the Ocean Decade, of 2030. And as has been said before, we do not believe that this defines or constrains the area of ocean and human health in terms of future work. Next slide. We also tried to make sure that all 3 areas had the following cross-cutting themes. They had to take into account the health of both the ocean and the people, be linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, and incorporate factors such as equity and equality, sustainability, innovation, be within a context of rapid global environmental and other change, and always involve ocean literacy, citizen science, and co-creation. Next slide. Our conclusions and recommendations were, for the area of oceans and human health, interdisciplinary and international funding is needed, but we feel that this whole area will only go forward if the medical, public health, marine, and environmental science communities collaborate together. They also need to offer and create transdisciplinary training in this area, not only for themselves, but for the future generation of researchers, and must essentially co-create and engage with diverse communities. Next slide. So how is this all relevant to the Ocean Decade? Next slide. As many of you know, the UN Ocean Decade has identified that not only is the ocean under threat, but that our human health and well-being depend on the ocean health. And this is what underlies the principle of ocean and human health. Next slide. We believe that the Ocean Decade provides a framework for many different actions, but we feel that ocean and human health fits beautifully into this, as we have already outlined outcomes, challenges, objectives, and actions that can be taken forward in the next 10 years. Next slide. And we're particularly happy and excited by the fact that the Ocean Decade by the UN has also recognized that if we don't all work together and co-design, if the affected communities and other stakeholders are not involved in this research and actions, we will not be able to do this true revolution for ocean science. Next slide. So I just want to finish with something that we did a lot in the SOPHIE project, and I thought was very revealing, and for me at least, quite profound. We would always ask our audiences what their ocean and human health represents. And we would ask people to use social media to share a photograph, a poem, a piece of art, music. And we would love you to do this now through social media as well, if you feel comfortable doing that. This picture is my ocean and human health. It's a picture of my daughter as a small child in a beautiful place called Maine, which is a state in the northeast of the United States. And it represents my ocean and human health because she, as a current ocean scientist, is the future of ocean and human health and the Ocean Decade going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lora. Can we get the next slide, please? Okay, so now we're going to have a panel discussion, and I think we're going to start, maybe you can go to the next slide again, Britt. You can remember that you can actually post questions both to Lora and to our Global Voices in Slido. So remember slido.com, OHH is the code, and ask your questions there. To warm them up, I'm going to start off by asking the panelists the same question and get their answers to that. So if we can have the next slide. So on our panel today, I think we have everybody here except maybe Sandra. I suspect Sandra is not quite, didn't make it as far as I can see in the list. But we do have all of the speakers that we saw in the Global Voices. So Timmy, Bouley, Lota, Alcantara, Josep, Lloret, Jacqueline, and then Lora Fleming, obviously, who you just heard. But we also have Dr. Herve who will speak after the panel discussion. So we don't have so much time. So if I can ask the panelists to please put their video and or at least put their video on now. And then I'll ask the question, and then I'll just ask you to give your quick answers to those. The question I'm going to ask you all is basically, what do you think is the biggest impact that the ocean can have on human health, both in a negative or positive way? And you can answer whichever way you think. So if you can give us a quick answer to that, and I can't see you guys. There we go. Now I can see you. All right. I'm going to start with Timmy because we don't have Sandra, do we? No. So Timmy, if you can give us what you think.
Great. Well, there's so many ways to frame this, and I'm just going to skip to the positive because I think that's important, right? So there is no singular benefit. The ocean is where we came from. It's where all life came from, and without a healthy ocean, everything else would die, right? And so there are many, many, many benefits. But if I had to scope this and put this in context with where we are as a species and what we've done over the past 100 years and what we're going to do over the next 100 would be to tie its benefit to technology. We've developed these tremendously powerful tools in recent years, medicines and biofuels and gene sequencing, many of which would not have been possible without tools that we have gotten from the ocean. And so now it's time that we use some of these same tools that we have used to benefit our health to benefit the ocean.
There we go. I have to remember to unmute myself. Thank you, Timmy. Okay, and then Lota, if I can ask your impressions. We can't hear you.
Okay. Hello. I would first talk about the benefits. So in our case, the biggest benefit would be the food and livelihood, because we have more than 2 million people depending on fishing, maritime, and tourism industries. And overall, as a country, more than 70% of our animal protein would be coming from the ocean. But we have some threats here because we are having typhoons or tropical cyclones and storms, an average of 20 per year. That's too much, and it causes many destruction, bringing with it strong winds, heavy rains, and big waves, resulting to floods, wave surges, landslides, and more than 60% of our people are living in the coastal areas. So they are heavily affected by tropical storms. And also, with the effect of climate change, many of our low-lying communities, which is also many of us here, are threatened by climate hazards such as sea level rise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lota. I live in Belgium, so I feel your pain. It's also very okay, Josep, I think you're next.
Yes, for me, the biggest threat to human health coming from the seas is the humans themselves. In fact, when we are at the sea, we always create problems. Not everybody, of course, but many people create many problems. We tend to overexploit the marine resources, which are which are known to benefit our health because of the omega-3 fatty acids, etc., we tend to degrade our blue spaces with the degradation of the habitat and elimination of vulnerable species that sometimes have bioactive potential for the future discovery of marine drugs. Even in the lockdown, after the lockdown, you see all the people rushing into the sea, into the fragile marine environments. Sometimes these marine environments, like marine protected areas, do not have, like in the Mediterranean, not all have the infrastructure to accommodate all the people. So the problems are increasing and increasing. So even when the humans try to find refuge in these marine protected areas because we want help from the sea, what we bring to them is destruction, because we don't know still how to manage our seas. So for me, this is the challenge.
Thank you very much, Josep. Okay, Jacqueline, you're next on our list.
Thank you. As I reflect, I think what my fellow panelists have said is very true for us. We are seeing a lot of threats to human health in our oceans, and the threats are very much invisible. We are not probably able to track them in a way that makes sense. But as I reflect a bit further, having a community link is critical. And there is a sense, I think, with COVID that we have become, we are moving towards a digital ocean. I'll put that in quotes, because the digital ocean means everything is done remotely, it's done from afar. And there's a sense that we are losing the communities, we are losing community knowledge. And I believe the biggest threat we would have to human health is not being careful enough to track that knowledge and keep communities in the center of the health dialogue. So I think for me, digital ocean may not be the way to go, or we really need to think about it critically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. That's a very, very good observation. Herve, I'm going to ask you to give the same, to give your impressions.
If I have to, thank you, Sheila. If I had to choose one of the prominent benefits, I would say seafood, and including seaweed, because it would have a tremendous importance in the future years. And as for the threats, I think ocean pollution is one of the biggest threats, with the interconnection between plastic waste and chemical waste and biological waste. So I think those are the main, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Lora, I think you don't really want to say something, but
yes, I do. Yes, I do.
You do? Oh, go for it, please.
So I want to express this actually as a challenge. We now have lots of evidence, really good evidence, that interacting with blue environments, particularly the ocean, is excellent for your physical health and your mental well-being. And it's even more important because we've seen in developed countries, in the high income countries, that it's particularly true for people who are poor, that impact is even more important for them. And to me, the challenge is, how do we go around the world and, as Jacqueline has said, involve communities who actually can be extremely poor, very at risk in the future, so that they too can have these benefits, as well as the populations of the more developed countries. So to me, the challenge is, how do we really apply all this evidence of positive?
Thank you very much. Okay, and then I'll remind you that there is, you can ask questions in Slido. So in slido.com, OHH is the code if you didn't know that before. We have quite a lot of questions here, but none of them tell me who I'm supposed to ask the question to. So it's very unhelpful for you guys asking questions. So I'm going to ask the one that I think is the most interesting, because you didn't put a name. And you didn't put even your own names, which is very unhelpful. So this is a question from Anonymous. And the question is, I'm in the architecture field, and I'm interested in how you recommend our buildings can work with this research to help promote the oceans and our health. So this is a very interesting question. If anybody wants to answer that question, maybe raise your hand if anybody has any ideas. Yeah, Lora.
So in the BlueHealth Project, we've actually worked with a landscape architect and their group and urban planners. And one of the things we've done is create tools that can be used by communities as well as urban planners to evaluate the coast and blue spaces before and after doing an intervention. So I guess one point I want to make is when you do interventions, you need to be able to show a baseline, show that there's a change, positive or negative, and then evaluate it at the end. So I would highlight that as one piece of work that I think is useful in this space. Also, and I am not an architect, I understand that there are Scandinavian architects, for example, who are experimenting with using, for example, these large containers and making them able to be to float. So is there a whole thing of working with communities at risk to develop different types of architecture that is, if not climate change proof, at least is climate change adaptable? And lastly, I would just say there are a lot of populations, island nations and other coastal communities who've been living in these areas, as you've already heard described by our global voices for many years. I think talking to them and learning their lessons would be very helpful as well.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add to that? We've got loads of other questions, so don't feel the need. There is a question. Wendy Watson writes, she's so good for us. She has a question for Herve. What are the plans to broaden the participation of the WHO and the medical and health communities in the ocean decade?
One of the objectives of the Monaco Symposium, we want to raise awareness among policymakers and involve healthcare professionals. And we want to point out that as for climate change, there are direct and indirect effects on human health. And it does not only concern fishes and marine mammals. So, that's the objective. We want to involve the healthcare professional and maybe involve some lessons in the healthcare professional courses about ocean and human health.
Thank you very much. Okay, then there is a question on how can we use the Ocean Decade to promote ocean and human health science. This is from Anders Hoksøyer. My pronunciation, Norwegian pronunciation is obviously not that good, from the University of Bergen. So he says, how can we use the Ocean Decade to promote ocean and human health science without getting too fragmented? I don't know if anybody wants to answer that. I think maybe Josep, maybe you will have an idea of how we can use the, or anybody else for that matter. How do you think we could do that? Can't hear you, Josep.
Probably Lora with the SOPHIE project can have a better answer than me, but for sure the European projects like the one that has now finished is a good opportunity to bring all together, but also we need, as it was said before, the local communities and the local projects to be built up. Without local project in the cities, in the communities, in the town, in the coastal villages, it will be very difficult to attain a final good way to approach all these issues. So for me, the science, it should be not only at the European level, but also at the national, regional, and local level. And with this, everything will be less fragmented.
I did the same thing. Thank you, Josep. I don't know if anybody else wants to answer that. I see there is a question for Lota. I think it's a question for everybody, but the question is from Ole Brodnik, and he asks, how can we circumvent the tragedy of the commons when it comes to exploiting ocean resources? Lota, I think he's asked to you, but I think everybody can have a go.
Yeah, it's very challenging, it's very hard. But yeah, the reality is many poor people are exploiting the ocean, but they are also very, very, very dependent on the ocean. So just like what Josep and Lora saying, it's really talking to them, listening to them, giving support, some interventions from the government and the science, of course. So yeah, it's a lot of really studying and working with them.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to have a go at Tragedy of the Commons.
I could add that I believe it's important to work upwards as well, so that policymakers become interested. We have policymakers that are interested in things happening on land, not necessarily in the oceans. So that means we end up without frameworks that are strong enough to govern ocean management. So if we get policymakers interested, I think that's one step in that journey.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I also have another question which I think you might be able to answer. It is from Nuzulia Sari from Blue Communities in Indonesia. And she says, as Lora said about the challenges in more developing countries, where do the opportunities for change exist and how can they best be used? I was wondering if you can think of any opportunities in Kenya or Indonesia or anybody else, and how we can use these opportunities.
I could start off. I think the opportunities lie in scientists being able to communicate their findings. The ocean literacy dialogue is where I think big opportunities lie. For a country like Kenya, this is the first time we are talking about oceans in a significant way. When we hosted the Blue Economy Conference, it was the first time we were putting oceans up front on a national agenda and a national platform. And so we have to sustain that. We have to sustain that dialogue. Scientists have to develop abilities and seek opportunities to write in social media, write up in newspapers. Our populace reads newspapers. Some use radio. That has far-reaching effects. So opportunities for change are there, but we have to begin to understand how people learn, to be able to communicate in the ways they learn and retain that knowledge, to be able to use it for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Lora. I think I see you want to say something.
So two things, and my own experience is quite limited, but I'm on a wonderful project called the Blue Communities Project in Southeast Asia. And I've become aware of an organization called PEMC, which basically is trying to apply marine spatial planning at the community regional level throughout Southeast Asia. And they have been able to draw in, as Jacqueline said, local and regional and national policymakers, as well as researchers, early career researchers, communities, et cetera. And I think they're a really interesting organization to see how they've been able to do that. And the other thing I'll point out, and this goes again back to Jacqueline pointing out that communities really, and Lota too, have to be at the basis of everything we do. There's a new initiative called the Blue Climate Initiative. And they actually have a prize out, which I think just closed, unfortunately, last month, but will hopefully lead to more of this, for communities to organize themselves and apply for this prize around actions towards adapting and mitigating climate change. And to me, the idea that we're shifting the attention, the funding, et cetera, towards the communities that are actually affected and having them bring in the policymakers and the experts, to me, is a way forward.
Thank you, Lora. Okay, so I think we're unfortunately going to run out of time, but I'm going to ask one last question, and the question came to Herve. Oh no, somebody has done something now. What's happened to my questions? There was a question that came to Herve. Oh yes. The question is from Peter Miller from PML in the UK, and he said, Herve, how can we make it easy for governments to transform ocean human health actions into national policies? And I want to ask that question to you, but I'm going to ask the same question to Timmy and Josep as well, because, why don't we have a wraparound? So I'll start with Herve and then go to Timmy, and then we'll see what everybody says. So the question is, how can we How can we make it easy for governments to transform the Ocean Decade and ocean human health actions into national policies?
Yeah, thank you, because I think we will need all the panelists, because it's a tough one. And maybe I think that the role of the focal points of each international organization to promote the Ocean Decade proposition to their government, and to relay those propositions. But and we have to invite those focal points and international organization representative to the scientific and meetings, or like this one. I think some of them are among us. So to make the link between scientists and policymakers.
Thank you, Herve. And Timmy, I guess you can answer it more from a kind of business perspective, but I mean, business is important for government too.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think I can take it from two perspectives. One is as an American, and one is as someone that worked at the World Bank for 8 years as well. From an American perspective and seeing what's happening there right now, I think it's illustrative of the value that like individual voices have, and how it's important for policymakers to listen to their constituencies. So you get people to advocate for this, you get them out there in the streets, you get them talking to policymakers. They will respond to that, because that translates into votes for them and how they keep their job. And secondly, having worked at the World Bank and with a bunch of economists, is put numbers on it. Make it easy for them to understand. Say, all right, if we invest in this, we'll get this much in return. I think that's incredibly useful, and that's how policy gets made. And I think that it's up to this community to ensure that we're doing that.
Okay, Josep?
Yes, I think that for many decades, we have been living in a system, in an international system, where the treatment and the cure is more important than the prevention. So we need to shift this paradigm. And I think the oceans and human health, we have seen 3 topics, and at least 2 topics, which is healthy seafood for a healthy diet and healthy blue spaces. They are dealing with the promotion of health and the prevention of illness, rather than treatment or cure. So we need to be aware, and the World Health Organization has to prevention, promotion of health, preserving our marine environments, and this will be the best recipe, the best recipe for the future of people's health. I understand.
Thank you, Lota, if you want to answer that.
Yeah, I'll just repeat that in our place, because there are so much poverty in the area. So the government really needs to exert more intervention, supportive policies, and more support for the ocean and the people in the near the ocean. That's all. Thanks.
Jacqueline, you get to have the last word.
Thank you. I think the sense I have is similar to what Timmy has said, put numbers on it. And from my reflection, one thing we do a lot of is the descriptive science and identification of species and where there are, but then not the value, not linking up with economists that can help us put a number to it. Governments are interested in a number, because and so we have to get this message, as Timmy has rightly put, into a value. I know there is a lot of debate on valuation of ocean services, but at the end of the day, when I go to my policymakers, they are asking me about value. They're asking me, is that value sustained? If it is a fishery, can we always have this species? And so we have to begin to do the right science to be able to give that back to policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry that we don't have more time to go through some of these questions, because I see the questions are still coming in. We will keep these, and we will try and answer these. And if you've left your name, we can get back to you with some answers from if there was anybody that you've specifically asked. So we will do that. But now I'm afraid we kind of are in the wrap-up phase, and maybe we should have made this a bit longer. So Britt, if you can go to the next slide, please. So now we're going to hear about the conference from Dr. Herve Raps. You've heard from him before. So Herve, the floor is yours.
Yeah, due to the health crisis, we have to reduce the format and the duration of the symposium to 2 afternoons instead of 3 days, but we are still doing it. We will still be able to welcome participants physically, but the symposium will be streamed online. The first afternoon would be devoted to ocean and human health, and the second one to the links between ocean pollution and human health, and in particular the public release of the scientific report coordinated by the Boston College and the Scientific Center of Monaco. So we will still have some of the keynote speech and also the short communication. And we received nearly 100 short communication. We are evaluating the abstracts right now, and some of them will be broadcast live, and the other will be put on a virtual gallery on the symposium website, like posters in a physical congress. And one more thing, the symposium has become free. On-site and online, but you still have to register on the website, which is oceanhealth.monaco.org. Thank you, and I hope to see you in December in Monaco if we can.
Thank you very much, Herve. Is there another slide? That was the only slide for that, right? So can you go to the next slide, please, Britt? Okay, so yes. Just to remind you guys that it would be great to see you. Both Lora and myself will be at the event. Well, maybe not physically at the event, but you'll see us online at the event in Monaco in December. So it's I think we've just got a little bit of time to for Julian to close, but I'm actually wondering if we shouldn't do the last Slido about what do you think oceans and human health means now. So if you can go back to Slido. Sorry, Britt, I'm upsetting the apple cart here, but maybe you want to skip through Julian's slides if possible. And sorry, Julian. So while Julian is giving us the important information about what's happening, you might want to go back to Slido and tell us what you think oceans and human health means to you now again, and we'll make a word cloud of that at the end. So once you've done that, I think we can go back to Julian, and Julian can give us the important what's happening next slides.
Great, thank you very much, Sheila. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you and we see you.
Great, wonderful, and thank you again for leading this webinar, and to all our partners, and of course to our panelists. I think you know, this is far too short for really exploring in depth all the issues and the different streams of the discussions we've heard in the last hour. But I think this is very exciting and very encouraging to explore and to continue those discussions within the framework of a UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So my task now in the next 3 minutes or 4, whatever is left, is really to give you a bit of a pointer of where and how you can you know, continue those discussions and really engage in the context of a decade. One important piece of information is that after this long preparation phase, which basically took us over 3 years, and many dialogues and discussions with scientists, with policymakers, with philanthropy and the private sector, We have now developed the implementation plan of a decade, which is now under review by the UN General Assembly as we speak. So in the coming weeks, we will hopefully anticipate the green light from the UN to move forward with the framework that the decade offers. And it is really a framework. I think it's about designing and developing transformative actions that can really support all the dimensions of the Agenda 2030 as they relate to the ocean. So how to engage? I think there are different ways to do and approach the issue. The first one is really about getting your community to prepare and lead decade actions. Of course, we want those decades to be transformative and to be very much solution-oriented, because this is not just science for scientists, it's science for really coming up with solutions. And we, of course, need to include the aspects related to innovation and technologies to leverage those dimensions to really upscale and deploy those solutions. It's about inclusivity, bringing different group of stakeholders who do not always have a voice on those issues together. It's about the concept of co-design and engaging with end users from the start rather than an afterthought. And it is, of course, about transdisciplinarity. And what a better topic than ocean and human health as a transdisciplinary topic. So please think about that. I'll say in the next slide, I'll go a little bit more in depth. No, sorry, I haven't finished. Just stay on that slide for one more second. It's also about organizing yourself, in particularly in establishing stakeholder decade groups on this topic. We really count on the communities out there to lead the discussion, but really use the decade as a convening framework and to organize thematic discussions as well as regional discussions. It's about connection, it's about connecting the people, it's about establishing new collaboration. And of course, we will have a broader stakeholder forum, which will be established in early 2021, where we would really like to see a dedicated stream on these issues. It's also about making resources available, because of course, we want to use the decade to leverage and align and those investments around the world, whether it's a national, regional, or international level, and really also trigger additional resources for the new transformative actions we want to promote. So you can become a member of the Ocean Decade Alliance and make available resources, whether it's in kind through your institutions or in more financial means. And of course, it's about playing an active role in communicating about the decade, raising awareness with all stakeholders, and we will launch at the end of this year the Generation Ocean campaign, which will be supporting all the decade actions around the world. So please again engage and use this really to convince and engage over a group of stakeholders. We'll move now to the next slide. So Vladimir Ryabinin in his introduction highlighted that we will be releasing the first call for decade actions, because of course the decade will effectively start in January, but we want already start to identify a number of flagship programmatic actions so that we can really get the decade into action. And those programs will also trigger hopefully an ecosystem of different type of interventions, whether at project or activity level. So this call will be issued on the 15th of October. It will be open for a 3-month period. And it is really targeting proposals for global or major regional programs. Those can be regional, but again, they can also be thematic. And we are also calling for institutions to come forward to help us support the coordination functions of a decade, either through playing an active role, for example, through the collaborative centers that will be launched, or providing resources for the coordination. So this is not the first call. Of course, there will be several calls in the course of a decade. We anticipate probably about 2 every year. But this is an important moment for really establishing a baseline of actions and hopefully encourage and trigger many more actions to follow. We have a specific documentation which is available on the website, but of course we will be organizing some active communication in the coming weeks. We will have 2 live Q&A sessions for applicants in October and in November. And at the same time, we're also triggering action with our UN colleagues and sisters and brothers whether it's through the UN Ocean Network, to really get also other bodies of the UN to move proactively on this. So again, please sign up to the oceandecade.org website to find out more about this first call and to access the resources. And then finally, we'll move to the next slide. So what's next? So as I said, we are now the implementation plan of the decade, which, by the way, will be a living document. This is something that is not fixed in stone. There are emerging issues and there are new policy requirements that will come up in the next 10 years that we need to be able to respond to as a really adaptive framework. So. But this document is now really in the hands of the policymakers, and this will be this process will be completed in December. As I said, we have a first call for action in October. In early December, we will be organizing a high-level event for the pre-launch of the Ocean Decade Alliance, probably back-to-back with our Ocean Conference, virtual conference taking place in Palau. And then, of course, we have the start of a decade, and then we will start rolling out those different structural elements. We have, of course, the stakeholder forum. We have the Decade Alliance, and so on. So this will take a little bit of time, but I'm sure that by the mid 2021, we will have all those mechanisms in place to really ensure a strong participation and engagement. The decisions on the first group of endorsed decade actions contributed through the first call of action will be made in March and April. And then, of course, we will use those endorsed action to promote these in the various events that we are foreseeing. In particular, I want to highlight the first International Ocean Decade Conference, which is planned to be taking place in Berlin, but also the UN Ocean Conference 2021, for which we do not have a date yet, but of course this will be an important time for really triggering action and commitments toward the decade. So with this, I hope this gives you a bit of an overview of how we are moving forward. Please don't hesitate to contact the IOC Secretariat. And thank again to all our partners who have been contributing to this important process over the last few years. This is something that we could not have done without you, and we are now counting on you to really help us and lead wherever you can the implementation of the decade so that we can really move into the action. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sheila.
Thank you very much, Julian. Okay, can we get the next slide? I think it's the last slide we have, Britt. Again, we asked you to go to Slido and give us one word. I see some of you have done that, so maybe, Britt, you want to put that up. It's great to see that we've got actually quite a lot of words, and they're very different from what we had before. I actually kept a picture of that one. Life is still the most important word there, which is great. Sustainability, responsibility, future, interconnected, interdependence, well-being, equity. These are all really good words to describe, I think, what the oceans and human health mean. And I can really, I feel for many of these words. So that's really great to see. I also saw responsibility there somewhere. So I think it's a really good way to summarize what we think oceans and human health means. I think there's only one more slide, which is basically just a reminder of the social media. So Britt, do you want to put that up, and then we can come back to that. If anybody wants to follow us on Twitter, Oceans and Human Health, Oceans Health EU is the SOPHIE, BlueHealth EU is the BlueHealth Twitter handle, eMarine Board for us, and IOC UNESCO for the Ocean Decade. And then the hashtag is Ocean Decade and Ocean and Human Health. So maybe you want to go back to the Slido, and we can leave it up there if people want to add any more words of what they think oceans and human health mean to them. With that, I'm afraid we're a little bit over, but I think it was more important to get the last questions in for the panels. I want to really thank the panelists. I want to thank the IOC, and I really want to thank Lora for making this happen. I think it was a great event. I think we could have spent another half an hour talking to our panelists, but I really want to thank you all. And thank you very much to my team, the Marine Board team, who's made this happen, both on YouTube and in Zoom, and answered all the questions of everybody as everything else was going on in the background. So thank you very much. I think we'll leave the active poll on for a little while, and I hope to see you all virtually, at least in Monaco. Thank you very much.